This episode of the Living Working Abroad show. Thanks for joining us today, and hope you're enjoying an early summer, late spring time. In Europe, weather can be mixed. In our EU office, it's very hot and sunny, close to the Mediterranean. You should join us sometime. We're available if you want to make us an inquiry about living and working abroad in the EU and in Cyprus or the Middle East. Or you can join us to talk about relocation, your tax residency in your business, running it from the UK. So thanks a lot for joining us on the Living and Working Abroad show today. And today we've got a number of features where we look at the tax creep that's going on in the UK at the moment. It's quite a big issue on a number of different fronts for clients, so we want to have a look at how that can affect your business, your property, your family, your pensions, your inheritance tax. As a tax creep of the existing UK establishment moving forward impacts you, and what you can do to consider moving your liabilities out of the UK and into tax efficient, low tax locations such as Cyprus, the hidden gem of the Mediterranean. So I want to go first of all, there's a lot of news at the world at the moment. I don't know if you've noticed, but in the middle of June, there's a lot of news going on. And I just want to talk about some of those issues. First of all, I wanted to pick up on grammar. Now, I am not the most eloquent or the best at English, okay? But I want to look at the meaning of two words, ignorance and bigotry, okay? We're seeing with the UK government where they've got this continual refusal to admit or allow access to reports and investigations on things that have gone on in the past. And the far left government that is in power in autocratic and absolute majority power in the UK, led by Keir Starmer at the moment, it loves to call everybody far right. If you're a far left government, anybody that's in the centre, anybody that's normal and reasonable is far right to you because you are so far left on a different planet. But let's have a look at the word ignorance. It's something that the political elite, the metropolitan elite in the UK, likes to label anybody that says something that they don't disagree with. They don't like social unrest when young children are raped or murdered, and therefore they want to stifle that and not make that public. And so they're choosing to define people as far west. So let's have a look at what ignorant means. There's three common types of ignorance, okay? So there's a typical ordinary arrogance, just a lack of knowledge. Now that's not true of educated people in the British Parliament, I'm sure. But there's also willful ignorance. Willful ignorance is where you've got a conscious choice that you're making to ignore information, to ignore what people are saying about what is going on in their communities, where police choose for diversity reasons not to mention that young girls have been groomed and raped by gangs of people from wherever they are. It's wrong. And then you've got higher ignorance, which is ignorance of ignorance. They're not even aware that they're ignorant. And it's they haven't got that deeper level of awareness about their own limitations and understanding of the world. That you can stand up and lead a government and want to claim that it's all about stopping diversity and social unrest, and therefore it's okay to cover up what people are doing in terms of abusing children and murdering people and manipulating people, things that are against the law in the UK. And that is my choice. So that's what ignorance looks like. It could be uneducated, it could be unqualified, it could be empty-headed, It could be somebody that's dead from the neck up. But the opposite to ignorance is somebody who's educated and knowledgeable. And you can't be knowledgeable if you don't find out the facts. And if you want to ignore the facts, then we've got a problem. We've got a real problem, and we need to have a look at that. They're talking about doing the investigations into the rape gangs in the UK. Just consider what's going on. Why are you excluding the civil service and the police from that investigation? Wouldn't that make the investigation ignorant of the facts? Or is it that the head of the civil service and the head of the legal authority in the UK for the 10 years that this was allegedly going on from 2009 to 2019 was in fact Sue Gray and Keir Starmer? What is everybody trying to hide? Let's get the facts out, let's get the criminals in jail, and let's protect the children. You don't want your children abused at school, on the bus, anywhere. We want to protect and give our children a confident place to grow. And you need to have confidence in everybody at all levels. No cover-ups, get the figures out. No ignorance from the people. Let's get the truth out based upon facts. Let's look at another word now, just to define, let's make it understood. What is a bigot? A bigot who is ostensibly and unreasonably attached to a belief, an opinion, or a behaviour. Now that could be a racist, it could be a homophobic, it could be anybody who's prejudiced against anything. You know, I don't like cold showers, I don't like hot showers, I don't like sauna. You know, but that is the basis of prejudice. But when they become antagonistic and aggressive towards somebody else, that other person or that other group, then it becomes real bigotry. In a free democracy, you're supposed to be able to have the freedom to say your thoughts, not to carry out illegal actions, not to be defamatory and undermine people, but freedom of speech is a core principle of a free democracy. And if Britain is a free democracy, people should be able to say what they think. That doesn't mean you're bigoted and putting other people down. It means you've got the right to have free speech and not to have the thought police knocking on your door like Suella Braverman has had this week, because she said something which was her free right to say. That is not, or should not be in a free democracy, something that's illegal. A bigot is somebody who strongly and unfairly dislikes other people and ideas. A bigot, for example, could be somebody who labels everybody in the country of the UK to be far right, because they don't agree with their secular beliefs and their personal opinions. It could be a person a bigot could be a person who hates or refuses to accept other people and other opinions into their way of thinking, and label them and put a mother with a young child in prison for saying bad things. You can rape somebody in the UK and get out after 3 or 4 years with good behaviour. A bigot is a person who's intolerant of somebody else's opinion and beliefs and behaviours if they differ from their own, and that doesn't thrive in a free democracy. Bigots are intolerant, the prejudiced people, the fanatical, the sectarian, the racist and the chauvinist. They've got no place in the UK from whatever walk of life they come. But when you've got an autocratic metropolitan elite applying those principles to their civil service and their way of governing, then you're moving towards autocracy and not a freedom of speech where people go about their business but are not able to say what they think, feel and believe. For me, obviously what I'm doing, I'm saying this is the dictionary, English dictionary definition of ignorance and bigotry, and that's what it is. And it works both ways. It isn't always a negative, it can also be a positive. It can be somebody who's being arrogant and aloof, can still be a bigot and ignorant of what is the truth. Let's consider if somebody, when they're being ignorant, are being willfully ignorant, or just that they don't know what they're doing. When you go to a football match, you often hear the referee being chanted at saying you don't know what you're doing. So is that because he doesn't know the laws of the game and the rules of the game and how the game is played, to be ordinarily ignorant? Or is it he's willfully choosing to be biased in his favour? Or does he just not like the other side or the other manager and just wants to punish them by giving them a questionable goal? So ignorance can work. You don't know what you're doing is often a chant you hear in the football stadiums. Let's see what happens in the UK in the coming months. If you've got any questions, you want help and advice on living and working abroad, contact us at proactpartnership.com. We welcome your comments and feedbacks, and always looking to partner up with people who are looking to expand their network of business contacts around the world for expats living and working abroad. You can always contact us and find out more information at proactpartnership.com. What the fuck are you up to? The Lisbon Treaty in the late 90s was an EU construct which allowed freedom of movement around an expanded EU. The elite rich countries, the established old guard of the EU, the France, the Belgium, the Germans and the Dutch, didn't want to allow the newly expanded Europe to include the Eastern European states. Too much freedom of movement straight away, because they deemed that the poorer people in Poland, Romania, Bulgaria and the like, they're coming from an Eastern European lower GDP economy, needed time to adjust, and they would just come and take all the jobs of their locals. They didn't want to do that. So when the Lisbon Treaty allowed the Eastern European countries in, and what a great benefit they brought to the EU, but it gave each country a restriction that they could limit freedom of movement for East Europeans for up to 10 years. Every single country did that apart from the UK. So Tony Blair decided to let everybody into the UK, welcome the East Europeans, which made a great cultural change with the Polish, Bulgarians, Romanians coming into the UK. Thank you very much for that. But with all due respect, it means that UK productivity and wages are lower for British people. People earn less in the UK now because wages are lower, because they've absorbed and shared the wealth with Romania, Bulgaria and the Polish people of Eastern Europe. Now, good for them, because they're building up now, and they've got some economic might of their own. But what we've also seen over the last 25 years is a migration explosion. Now, this comes from, in my humble opinion, medical aid going around the world into South America, Africa, Asia, and therefore people aren't dying. 100 years ago, even in the UK, 50% of people will be dead by the time they're 20 of childhood sicknesses. It doesn't happen anymore because you've got vaccinations and you've got medical treatments that keep you alive. So you've got half the world's population is under 25, under 30, and they want jobs and they aren't in their wider economy countries. So those people built up this new trade of economic migration. Let me illegally get into a country and start working there. And lo and behold, what has happened, what the fuck has happened, the fuck that has happened is that we've got this consensus that has been going on now forever, where migrants are paying money in their home country in Africa and Asia to migrate, just like humans did from Africa 40,000 years ago to wipe out the European Neanderthals, they migrated through the land masses. They managed to get through Turkey, they managed to get through Bulgaria, managed to, in the land borders on Moldova and Romania, get into Europe. They managed to cross all the borders miraculously and end up on the French border. But the French customs and the French border police, for some reason, is completely incapable. They know where the migrant camps are housed, right on the coast in Calais, and they know, they can see the ships in French waters leaving those things, but they never stop them. Now, why is that? Why is that? Why are the British paying the French to police the area and still the migrant boats come across with illegal people? Why? They're asking for asylum, and we've got this post-war legalisation, which countries sign up to, that where people are under political or war emergencies, they're allowed to claim asylum in another country, and everybody adheres to that. Think what happened to the Jews in Germany, or the Iranians are trying to do to the Jews now in 2026. So the asylum is a good thing for people that are suffering persecution or war or famine. But it's not meant for economic migrants, and the economic migrants have been allowed to fester and grow, and those people are coming into the UK, and because they're using the asylum law, and the British system has to then consider the asylum law, that they don't react to that, and potentially those people can stay, and if you're in Britain for 5 years, you can actually get citizenship. So there's an interesting scenario for the UK. The French could have claimed asylum in France, but France have got strict rules, and they don't let them get away with it, and they don't apply for asylum in France. What they do is apply for asylum in Britain, because Britain will put them up in hotels and then let the family join them later on. The French know what they're doing, the British know what they're doing. It's an illegal act, it's a criminal act. Unless you can prove you're an asylum seeker, technically, it's a criminal act to cross a border. It's a criminal act not to, if you cross into a safe country, which is Germany, why aren't you claiming asylum there? If you're in a safe country, Romania, why aren't you claiming asylum there? So it's criminal to not do that and then move on to the next country, and yet still Britain and France let it go on. And what the fuck is happening, because the French don't do anything about it. If you've got people in asylum camps, keep them there. But if the asylum camps work for France, why aren't Britain doing that? Why are they using homes that could be rented cheaper and easier for British people? Why is social housing being provided and hotels being provided for other people? Why is taxpayers' money being used for those expensive options when you could keep them in a camp like the French? Is that the incentive to come to Britain? What the fuck is happening? And when will any British government, like they haven't for the last 20 years, do anything about it? And when will the British government hold the French to account for not honouring their international commitments under the asylum treaties? This is a question the British should ask, because their taxpayers are paying for all this in Britain, not taxpayers in the French. The French are actually getting money off the British to stop them coming over, but they're still coming over. What the fuck? So that's a thought. Don't contact us about that, but you can comment if you like and share our video with other people. We're happy for you to do that. At ProAct, Live and Work Abroad, we look for opportunities for British people to explore the world legally, to legally cross a border and get residency, to prove that you've got income and capital and work, to create a business, to invest in property, to join family, living and working abroad. And within the EU, that was quite a big thing for EU citizens to be able to do that. You still need a resident permit to be able to work in that country. For British people now, to live and work in the EU, you do need a work permit. And post the post-Brexit period, each country had a discretion about how easy they allowed British people to come and work in the UK. Basically, from 2021 to 2024, the Cypriots were very, very relaxed, and in their view, they were allowed the British to come into Cyprus freely, and there's a large British community in Cyprus, so good for them and good for the Cypriots. What has changed now is that Cyprus is trying to join the Schengen zone and conform to the EU and adopt the EU regulations on migration and registration and tax registration to get into the Schengen zone. And this means that the Cypriot is moving away from the British, and now a British person needs a work permit to work in Cyprus, which, unless you've got a special talent, you can't really get. So if you're invited as a high earning entrepreneurial skill, you want to start a business, invest 300,000 in a business or property, you can do that. So come to Cyprus with a capital resource of 300,000 you can put in property or a bank deposit, then create a company and start your business. We can help people like that. But if you're relocating for any other reason, it's slightly more difficult. Now, the Cypriots might still want to sell you a property, and you can get a residence permit to stay in that property more than 90 days at a time. But with the Schengen zone, don't forget, you're only non-EU citizens are only allowed to have 90 days every 6 months, 3 months every 6 months in that EU country, and beyond that, they have to leave and not come back. So if you do own a property in Cyprus, you need to get a residency permit, which now has to be renewed each year. And you want help and advice on renewing that residency permit, you can help that. We can help you in Cyprus, and you can contact us, projectpartnership.com. Looking to the other side though, what if you want to do your tax planning and make an advantage in Cyprus over the UK? Can you do that? Yes, you can. In the UK, they'll tax your income, they'll tax your savings. Inheritance tax is coming in on non-doms and on pensions, and it's on your property when you leave that. So all that is potentially being caught up. Your corporation tax bill is 25%. Now, if you come to Cyprus, your corporation tax rate is 12.5%. There's no inheritance tax and there's no dividend tax. So suddenly, if you've got a holding company based out in Cyprus, you can have no dividend tax instead of 39% in the UK, and you've got no inheritance tax that you're building up. So all the business entrepreneurs relief for building up your business, which has been stolen away from you so that you pay 40% tax on it, all that can be protected, but it's better than that. If you've got a pension fund that is now being attacked for inheritance tax, if you come to Cyprus and you draw your pension, you've got to be over 55. But if you're over 55 and you've got, say, 2 million in your pension fund, you can draw that 2 million as a Cyprus tax resident with your pension registered in Cyprus and pay 5% tax. Why would you draw a 2 million pension fund now to get 5% tax? The reason you would do it as a Cyprus expat tax resident, the reason you would do it is that you would save yourself then 40% inheritance tax, because your pension fund is part of your inheritance tax fund. You can then invest that money away from your pension in a tax-free portfolio or tax-free fund. So there's a lot of tax creep going on. Inheritance tax is the ultimate tax that they're going to get when you die. You're going to get 40%. You're going to get capital gains tax, which has gone up by 80% in 2025. So it's 18 or 24% a capital gains tax if you sell something during your lifetime. And then you've got your dividend tax up to 39%, or your income tax up to 45% on what you earn. And then on top of that, the other tax creeps on unemployment and national insurance. More of that later. When you die, everybody has to fill out an inheritance tax form if you're doing a probate in the UK. And 7,500 people in the last year have had their property valuations challenged in revenue. So if you inherit a property and say it's 325, you've got no inheritance tax to pay. But if you then go on and sell that property a year later for 400,000, potentially there's an inheritance tax sum due. HMRC have got the access to the information online to track that. And they review the inheritance taxes a year later. They look at property disposals, and if you've got a liability by getting the property through probate without inheritance tax, but you take that profit later on, they will charge you the inheritance tax of 40%. So it's not all plain sailing. What you can do is take action during your lifetime to protect your business, your pension, your property and your investments from UK inheritance tax while you're alive. If you do it now, you can protect your family and your business assets across border and down generation. Contact us about business and family trusts and property trusts to give you control and protect your family from inheritance tax down the generations. Thanks very much for listening, and contact us at proactpartnership.com. There's a lot of tax creep coming up at the moment, and so for our main feature today, I just want to focus on what we mean by tax creep. In the 1970s, if we go back to the 1970s, we came to a period of the swinging 60s, Labour governments, a bit of a boom period, but then we went into busts as well. During the 70s, we had a winter of discontent, of strikes. We had the International Monetary Fund bailing out the Labour government. We had booms, we had busts, we had everything in the 70s, and it wasn't a good thing until it was kind of put right by strong, sound economic management in the 80s and 90s before everything started falling apart again. People forgot the history of the past and then created the mess that we're in today. And we're beginning to see there's potentially in 2025 this boom and bust cycle going on. When you look at the Bank of England and you look at the career civil servant, Andrew Bailey, who runs it, you could be rightly credited with acknowledging the fact that he doesn't know what he's doing, and that the Bank of England don't know what they're doing. After governments falsely threw money into the markets during the COVID period to protect the economy, it created inflation, because that's what printing money always does. And they created this higher level inflation, which was supposed to be temporary, and it's still with Britain today. So we've got this relatively high 3.5% inflation still in April, May 25, when the target that this Bank of England is supposed to get to is 2%, and they've not been anywhere near it for 5 years. And in fact, what they're doing, because they think it might be right, is reducing interest rates. Well, actually, if you reduce interest rates, it tends to increase inflation. Now, the argument is, well, hang on, we're reducing interest rates, but inflation is already too high, so it'll come down anyway. They don't know what they're doing. It might do, it might not do, but they don't really know. And if they do nothing, things might change, and if they don't do nothing, something might change. But what we're seeing is the transitionary inflation that we got post-COVID in 2021 is persistent and stuck in the economy, just like inflation became stuck in the economy in the 70s. And the question is have we got a bust coming along, and is the country going to need a bailout? We've just seen to much aplomb, spending review announced by the current government, where having increased taxes by £40 billion in the last year, that's taking 40 million out of taxpayers' money out of the economy to spend on their projects. They now announced that they're going to spend 40 billion. It was supposed to plug a 40 billion black hole, but now they're spending another 40 billion. So where's the black hole? If the black hole was going to be filled, where are you going to get the 40 billion to spend the money now? Now it could be that they're just going to keep the 40 million black hole. What the taxpayers can't afford to pay for in government spending, the government borrows the money and pays interest on. So the government in Britain is already at a record level of debt to capital, and eventually that leads to being bailed out by the international monetary alliances in the same way that Argentina has been in the recent past and Britain was in the 70s. Simple economics. Do you know what you're doing, Mrs. Reeves? I'm not sure. So because they've got this parrot PR playbook thing that they don't want to increase taxes for working people, well, everybody who's going to work is working. I'm working. You're putting up my taxes, directly and indirectly. But apparently, they weren't going to put up taxes for working people and VAT, but national insurance is okay. Excuse me, national insurance is another tax that you pay. So an employer now in the UK is paying 15% to employ you. So if you earn £1,000, the national insurance that the employer has to pay is £150 tax into the system. They don't get a benefit from that. You may get a benefit if you've got any sort of child benefit or inability claim, and that's fair enough. I mean, that's what the system's about. But they increased that by £25 billion. So for a company to employ somebody, they have to pay 15% tax. That's in addition to the employee's social insurance contribution. So you're not paying 20% tax, you're paying near 30% tax because you've got your national insurance. Because remember, you used to have an allowance up to 12,500 against national insurance, but now the employers are paying national insurance from 5,000. So not only can an employer got to pay 15% to employ somebody, they've got to pay 15% to employ somebody, even if it's a part-time worker earning £100 or more a week. So, funnily enough, employment goes down by at least the amount they increased. So there could be 15% more employment if there was 15% less tax. But the tax is going to the government to pay for what the government thinks is fair. But now, that was the last budget to fill the black hole of 40 billion, but now they've announced another £40 billion of spending. So where's that money going to come from? They can't keep borrowing or the economy will collapse. If they don't keep borrowing, they've got to either cut spending, which they've said they're not going to, or they have to increase taxes. It's the only way. It's not your money, Mr. Government, it's the taxpayers' money. You want the taxpayer to give you 20, 30, 40, 50, 60% of their earnings and their capital to you in national insurance and income taxes and VAT taxes. If you want them to give you all that money, then make it worth their while. But of course, this is the conundrum that the UK is in. And if they're going to meet their targets, taxes are going to go up. And it will be somebody else's fault. The economy's failing. Somebody else will get the blame. Everybody else gets the blame. It might be the civil service. It might be the head of the legal service that has covered everything up. We don't know. But with the global uncertainty that's going on and the inflation target completely being missed, the UK is very in line to potentially get another decade of the 70s where you've got boom, you've got bust, you've got winters of discontents and strike, you've got International Monetary Fund bailing out a once proud country because it's bust, it's gone bankrupt. Bankrupt of ideas and bankrupt of the money to pay for what they want to do. And to ignore that and to be ignorant of that is either willful or higher ignorance, where you're seemingly aloof and you're not even aware of the limitations of what you can do if you don't have the money to do it. So ignorance at play in the UK. If you relocate overseas, there's lots of places you can relocate and they won't necessarily pay tax. Now the Middle East has been a bit of a Boomsville. That is one location. There are other places around the world where expats can live and work quite comprehensively. So for our EU base is Cyprus. And we like Cyprus because it's business friendly, it's family friendly, and it's individually friendly. So if you have a holding company based in Cyprus, you can halve your corporation tax rate on the UK, so you can get a management service operating out of Cyprus to manage your UK business and take the profits from the UK, manage it from Cyprus, and the retained profit in Cyprus, half the VAT rate. If the shareholder is a tax resident in Cyprus and you work remotely for the UK company, yes, you pay your corporation tax in the UK, you pay 0% tax on dividends, not 39% in the UK. If you've got a pension fund where you could be paying 45% income tax or 40% inheritance tax, you can come to Cyprus and over the age of 55, you can withdraw that pension up to all of it and never pay more than 5% tax as a flat rate pension tax. And then better still, there's no inheritance tax and very, very few capital gains taxes. The only capital gains tax in Cyprus effectively is on real estate in Cyprus. So once you're in Cyprus, you've got no capital gains on assets and no inheritance tax on death. So your family can inherit that. And one of the ways to do that would be to use a family trust for your business, your property, your investments, which avoids the cost and delay of probate, avoids family disputes on death, and it avoids inheritance tax of 40% or more. So by organising your affairs now, if you built up your business, you organise your business and you've made a lot of money, think about organising your family as well. By having your assets controlled within a family trust that you control and that is based in Cyprus, supported and administered with ProAct, you can have 0% inheritance tax, no capital gains, and no dividend taxes. That is what we do for our clients. So we'd love you to come and join us in Cyprus, or Cyprus base for sure. Don't forget, I forgot to mention the other thing. Cyprus also have this wonderful 60-day rule where you only have to be in the country 60 days. So you can be remote working, tax resident based in Cyprus, but doing the work all around the world in different countries. Lots of different things for Cyprus, and it's only going to get better with changes that are coming up in 2026. So for more information and guidance on Cyprus as an EU low tax, business, property, family friendly environment, across border and down generations, contact us at proactpartnership.com. I've got one more thing I want to say today. Look, it's all in the news. Iran's grand plan has backfired. Israel trumps Iran, Iran's terrorist leaders. So when we look back on history, the Jordanians, what is now the Jordanian countries, they're Arabs. They came from Saudi and Palestine to create the country of Jordan. This was Jordan and Iraq, all part of the old Persian Empire. The Persian Empire was magnificent. It carried on for 1,200 years, 1,200 years. The Persian Empire was a great empire in the east, matching and outliving the Roman Empire, depending how you looked at that. The great adversaries to the Persian Empire was Alexander the Great. The Persians nudged the bear. The Macedonian king, he ended up dying, but his son Alexander took up the shuttle, united the Greeks, and created his Macedonian Greek Empire, and pushed the Persians back to where they belong, and it eventually led to the modern day structure where we've got countries for that. But still, Persia up until 1935, Iran up until 1935 was still known as the country called Persia. Iran was more of a local name, and it's one that they took on there. But the Iranians' leadership changed at the end of the 70s. And today we're looking back at the 70s and say, what could happen again? Well, it was bad as far as Iran's concerned and the world's concerned, because at the end of the 70s, the Shah, the emperor, the autocrat, whatever you want to call him, was deposed, and Iran got taken over by the religious Islamic leaders. Now, the Islam in Iran are Shia Muslims, who are the opposite of the Sunni Muslims. Think Protestant and Catholic if you're Christian. So the Sunni Muslims are the Saudis, the UAE, and countries like that, as opposed to the Shia, based primarily in Iran, but in other countries as well. So they, for whatever reason, decided that their mission in life as an Iranian country is to destroy Israel. And obviously, everyone's getting a bit nervous over the last 20, 30 years if they can get nuclear power, and they've been completely committed to nuclear power. And what we see now is Donald Trump, having a negotiation with them and trying, ever since he came to power, to get an anti-nuclear proliferation treaty with them. What that would have meant for Iran is that they would not be able to have a nuclear bomb, and therefore they could not bomb out of existence Israel and all the Jewish people. Now, Donald Trump has been behind this all along. Although there's lots in the news about what the Israelis have done over the last couple of weeks, and don't forget all this trouble started when the Iranian-backed Hamas militia invaded and murdered 1,000 people in Israel over the Israel border in October the 7th, a couple of years ago. That's how this all started, but it started before that with militant terrorist groups in Lebanon, Palestine and Yemen. But ever since Trump came to power, the Americans have been attacking the Houthi rebels in Yemen, who are attacking shipping as it's going by, not just as pirates, but with rockets and ballistic. So the warplanes have been going in from the American military bases and from the UK military bases. So they've been at war and at odds with each other. And Israel have done their bit to defend themselves. And suddenly, with the threat of Iran suddenly becoming and going nuclear and not wanting to sign this international trade deal, which Mr. Trump is now asking them to sign, is saying enough is enough, and let's wipe those out. So the end game here is either Iran signs a nuclear non-proliferation treaty, or they get bombed out of its existence. Why is the USA so involved? What is their interest? Well, being a football fan, I've got a slightly different side to that. In the USA at the moment, as we speak in June 25, well, Israel and um, Iran are at odds with each other. We've got the Club World Cup going on in America, which is sponsored by the Saudi Public Investment Fund. The stadiums are half empty apparently. Some people even watch it on TV. It's broadcast all around the world. There is an online broadcast company called DAZN. It's an American company, online sports broadcaster. I'd never heard of them before, but apparently they have got that. They bought the rights for the Club World Cup to sell to their people. Nobody bought it. So they're actually distributing it through free-to-air in some channels. I don't know which, I'm not interested really, but they paid for it because it's a bankrupt organisation, it's not making any money. They paid for it with a capital injection, a capital gift in effect, not as a capital sponsorship. So it wasn't advertising based, it wasn't capital based, it was just money. And that money came from the Saudi Public Investment Fund. So America is very happy to be hosting this Club World Cup football, supported by and funded by Saudi Arabia. And what's the deal that's going on there for Trump? What possible deal could he have done with the Saudis, Sunni Muslims, in this fund? Straight after the Club World Cup in America is the CONCACAF Cup. Now CONCACAF is the North American nations where they all play each other, the equivalent of the European Cup for nations in Europe, and they're all going to be playing each other. Would you believe it? A special guest country has been invited this year in 2025, Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Arabia, who by the way are not in North America, they're in the Middle East, are going to be playing in the 2025 CONCACAF Cup in America, right after the Club World Cup there. And so that's nice for them. Next year, in 2026, the FIFA World Cup takes place in USA and Canada. Major sponsors, you got it, Saudi PFI. So the Saudis are sponsoring, and they've got a big financial deal with the United States. And you know, it's all very interesting. America's got 19 military bases in the Middle East, in the UAE, Dubai, Saudi, Kuwait, Bahrain. So all over the Middle East. They're even coming to Cyprus and Paphos in the next year or so. So the Americans got military bases all over the Middle East. They've also got 2 aircraft carrier formations. So America have got these 7 aircraft formations that jet around the world. They've got 80 strike aircraft on each one. It's an army. It's bigger than most countries' army that go around the world. So I've got 2 of those in the Eastern Mediterranean to back up what Israel do. Trump is committed, he said it all during his election campaign, to settling the Ukraine war, the Middle East war, very quickly. That's what he's trying to do. He offered a deal to the Iranians, he's offered it to them again. If they don't sign, he's going to finish it the other way. But fair play, he's going to back up his words with actions, what it looks like. And the world will be a safer place if there isn't another person that can let off a nuclear bomb. It's bad enough to see North Korea firing dummy or trial nuclear bombs into the Pacific Ocean. So we will see where that comes. So there is an end game. Either Israel will sign, Iran will sign a non-nuclear proliferation treaty, or there'll be regime change, or there'll be bombs into regime change. And that's how I read the things that have been going on in the world. So the Middle East remains very safe. It remains very safe because of Saudi's commitment and support with America, financial as well as political. to support Israel to end the game. Uh, Saudi and UAE and Egypt have all got cooperation deals. They've settled their differences are based upon religious grounds with Israel. What we need to do now is get the Palestinian state set up in such a way that they can get their settlement and peace without the aggravation of constant war and terrorism and aggravation. So that's what's coming on. So what is Trump's side hustle? Now, this is my speculation. This is what I think Trump's side hustle is to all this. Iran has been a big supporter of Putin over the last couple of years, supplying him with weapons and drones and munitions for their attack on the Ukraine. And yet now, when Iran is under attack, Russia is very standing back and is not getting involved. So I think that's a bit interesting. What I think Trump's side hustle is he's saying that don't get involved, Russia, don't get involved. A, you haven't got the military right to, but B, we're sorting Iran out anyway. That's what I think Trump said to him. He said, let me sort out Iran with Israel, and then we'll do a deal, and we'll give you a positive settlement in Ukraine. Now, whether you like it or not, and I don't, I think that the Russians were the aggressors, and there was no good reason, but I don't know the politics. I don't know the people in eastern Ukraine. If you're Russian and you want to be Russian, that's one thing. But countries shouldn't invade each other, and countries should shoot each other, and North Koreans shouldn't go into Ukraine to shoot Ukrainians for Russians. So whatever it is, but I think that Putin has done a deal with Trump to try and get that side hustle deal. So I think that what we'll get is a resolution of the Iranian situation in the next week or two, quickly followed by Ukraine and Russia finding a peace solution at last, but not under the eyes of the Ayatollah. Living and working in the Mediterranean, in Turkey, in the Middle East, continues to be safe. That there's a big, a stable community there, and we've got a changing world geopolitical situation. The 70s was about economic turmoil. The 30s were about political turmoil. We've got that mixture going on at the moment, where we can find a world in which everybody can live together. We could find some peace going on, maybe in the Donald Trump way, which doesn't agree with everybody, but it's better than everybody blowing each other up. So the Middle East could be a good place. If you don't want to work directly in the Middle East, you've got countries like Cyprus and Portugal, which are equally profitable ways for people to live and work abroad. So for more information and guidance on tax, relocation, operating your company as from abroad, and protecting your family assets, buildings, property, business and investments in a family trust, contact us at ProPartnership.com. Thanks a lot for listening. We'll see you again next time.